progress.
What time is Maariv?
8:05.
15 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. This week's Parsha of Et Hanan. So there are two gematrias that appear. The first one is on Et Hanan itself, that was the number of tefillot that Moshe Rabbeinu mounted in order to be able to enter the land of Israel. And they were not, they did not accomplish what he wanted. The Rebbeinu Shalom said to him, Al Tosef Daber Elai Od Badavar Hazeh, the case is closed. So Et Hanan represents 552, I think, 15, the Shilos that existed, that Moshe. So we don't have, we don't know quite how to define that, but whether it's each separate time that he prayed, or really it's different compositions. There's a second gematria. It says, "V'noshamtem ba'oretz, kisoli bonim uvnei bonim." The Kriyas HaTorah for Tisha B'Av. "V'noshamtem ba'oretz." Noshamtem means there are different interpretations. You became old in the land. You became accustomed to it. Others say V'noshamtem is like Lashon Yoshein. You became tired, you slept, you lost energy. You weren't the same people anymore. So that's also a gematria, 852, which opens up for us the entire area of how tradition dated the events that exist in the Chumash and how we align them, so to speak, with the dates that are commonly accepted in the world for these events. So the Gemara tells us there was something called Minyan Shtarot. Minyan Shtarot was established in honor of Alexander the Great and the Greeks. Alexander came in the 320s, but Minyan Shtarot didn't begin till 312 before the Common Era. And Minyan Shtarot, amongst many Jewish communities, was used as the basic date. We have Ktubot, especially from Italy and Provence, in the 12th and 13th centuries, that the Ktubah is dated to Minyan Shtarot. It's not dated to Briat Olam the way we write today. And in the time of the Gemara, Minyan Shtarot was accepted, so to speak, as being the secular date. That was the date that people dealt with. So the Gemara says that Minyan Shtarot is, the Chazal instituted it to begin 1,000 years after Yetziat Mitzrayim. Elef Shona Achre Yetziat Mitzrayim. In Minyan Shtarot, 312 before the Common Era is year 1 to Minyan Shtarot. So that means Yetzias Mitzrayim was 1312 before the Common Era. And that's the basis of Jewish dates. So 1312, and there were 40 years in the desert. So that takes us to 1272. And take the 852 years until the Churban Bayis Rishon. So 1272 minus 852 is 420. So the Churban Bayis Rishon was 420 before the Common Era. 70 years Golus Bovel. Ezra and Nehemiah and the Second Temple. 70 years later is 350 before the Common Era. The second Beis Hamikdash was 420 years. So that takes us to 70 after the Common Era. That is the way our tradition teaches us. That was the series of dates. The problem that exists is that according to archaeological and other records, Nebuchadnezzar, who destroyed the first Beis Hamikdash, and who's mentioned in Tanakh many, many times, his triumphs are listed in the year 586 before the Common Era. So between 586 and 420, there's a gap of 166 years. The average Jew on the street is not disturbed by this. Probably not even aware of it. But it's a big deal amongst the scholars. What happened here to the 166 years? Who's right? Because if Nebuchadnezzar is in 586 and the Golus Bovel is only 70 years, so that'll only take us to 516 and another 420 years. So then the Churban Bayis is way earlier than Titus and Vespasian and the records that we have. There was an interesting article written many years ago, 65 years ago, maybe more, that piqued my interest in this thing. It was written by Rabbi Schwab, Zichrono Livrocha. Was a great Talmud Chacham, and he was the Rav of the German community, Haladas Yeshurun in New York. He was the successor to Rabbi Breuer. I knew him very well. And he wrote that they made in honor of Rabbi Breuer's 80th birthday, the Kehillah published a book that they asked many Talmidei Chachamim to write articles. That was the custom in Europe. And so Rabbi Schwab wrote an article about this 166 years, what the problem is there. And he couldn't really come up with a definitive solution. So he conjectured, and I spoke to him about it, he conjectured that the 166 years, Chazal, for whatever reasons, purposely hid it. They changed the calendar to make it conform as though the 166 years didn't occur, and they had their reasons for it. Later in life, when the article was published, it caused quite a stir. First of all, you didn't have a Talmud Chacham of that note write about these things. Secondly, he didn't have people raise a kasha and not give it teretz. And Rabbi Schwab took a lot of grief for it. He once told me never publish an article. Advice which I also should have followed. But later in life, he publicly retracted. He said he's thought it over and that it's unlikely that Chazal would hide 166 years and not tell us a reason for it. We have no tradition that they did so. And therefore he said the scholarly date of 586 before the Common Era is wrong. Our date is right. If you would make the cheshbon as I made for you from Yetzias Mitzrayim to Minyan Shtoros 1,000 years, so you know that it was 1312 before the Common Era, and you take off the 852, and you take off the 70, and they take off the 420 from the Bayesheni, it comes out even. And he said, why they say 586? He says, they were wrong. There have been a number of historical books written, in Hebrew, some in English, that have dealt with this problem, at least in an offhand way. And in the Torah world, so to speak, the 586 is not accepted because it does not conform to the dates of Chazal, and it doesn't conform to what our tradition is. You found a piece of pottery that said 586 maybe, which naturally didn't exist, but you found archaeological evidence, etc. It's always subject to interpretation. All of archaeology is subject to interpretation. It's very hard to prove what happened 1,500, 2,000 years ago from shards or broken bricks, etc., etc. There's a famous satire on archaeology, which cured me of archaeology, in which the performer, he was an actor, it was a great performance, and he described what the archaeologist 1,000 years from now would find in Washington, D.C. So first of all, Washington became pound laundry. Washington. So they said the city was named Pound Laundry. And he went through the whole thing. They found pieces of Congress. They found a baseball bat. They constructed a whole world which is close, it has, Pound Laundry has some connection to Washington, but it's way off. And he proved how all of archaeology, so to speak, suffers from that many times they are close to something, they have some idea about it, but the conclusion is always a personal one, and it's influenced by one's bias. Now, the question is, gematrias. Are we bound to gematrias? So there's all color signs of gematrias too, It's that also. But in the Mishnah and Avos, it says it's paparos l'chochma. It, so to speak, is dessert. It's the appetizer. It's something that has value. And if Rashi quotes the Gematria, so Rashi evidently held that the Gematria contained within it the kernel of truth. And therefore, V'noshantem has bearing upon us. That 852. So this week's Parsha has these two Gematrias that are famous about the Tfilas of Moshe and about the years of the first Commonwealth. And there are other Gematrias. The Gemara quotes Gematrias. So it's not something that should be pushed aside, but rather something that should be handled, but handled delicately. Rabbi Chananya ben Akashi Omer Ratza Kadosh Baruch Hu v'Zakas Yisrael v'ficha chibur lahem Torah mitzvos shenemar Adonai chavetz man tzidko yagdil.